Okay, welcome everyone. It is an honor to be here at Johnson Houses. I want to thank all the folks who work at Johnson Houses, all the residents who have joined us for this very historic moment. We are unveiling a plan today to transform the New York City Housing Authority, to put it on a strong footing for the future, to protect the interests of hundreds of thousands of residents for the long haul. So this is a historic day for our city, and it's taken a lot of work to get us to this moment, and I want to acknowledge in a moment so many of the people who worked hard to put this plan together. But I can tell you, Next Generation NYCHA, this is a game changer. It's a 10-year plan to transform the Housing Authority, to bring it into the 21st century and make it strong for the long haul. It's long overdue, and it's finally here. Next Gen NYCHA is going to be a difference maker for the people of NYCHA. It's a strategic plan that will reduce costs, will generate more revenue for the Housing Authority, will make it more efficient, will make it more effective in serving over 400,000 New Yorkers. Let me acknowledge so many of the folks who are here, who are a part of the effort that led us to today and have been extremely supportive in this effort of transformation. First, want to thank our Deputy Mayor for Housing and Economic Development, Alicia Glenn. Thank you. Of course, our Chair and CEO of NYCHA, who you'll hear from in a moment, Shola Olatoye. The General Manager of NYCHA, Michael Kelly. The Chief of the NYPD Housing Bureau, Chief James Secreto. You're going to hear from, in a few minutes, a young woman who has a great story to tell, Naji Cook. We want to thank Naji for being with us today. We want to thank Councilmember Corey Johnson for being with us and for his support. You'll hear from his colleagues, the Speaker and Councilmember Torres, in a few minutes. I want to thank some of our partners in this work. We work very closely with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, represented today by the Director for Public Housing for the Regional Office, Luigi D'Ancona. Thank you very much for being here. We always thank HUD. I want to thank the NYCHA board members who are here and thank them for their hard work on behalf of the residents of NYCHA. I want to thank Kathy Wild and the New York City Partnership for her support for all, and the business community support for all that we are doing to help the residents of NYCHA, and you'll hear again from some of my colleagues in just a few moments. Let's go back to the beginning. This is a story that has a definitive beginning, 1934. The greatest mayor we ever had, Fiorello LaGuardia, believed that something bold and ambitious and transcendent had to happen to protect the interests of working New Yorkers. Remember, as in the grips of the Great Depression. And public housing was a brand new idea, but to the great credit of Mayor LaGuardia, he embraced new ideas energetically, and he said New York City would lead the way in creating not just public housing, but a great public housing authority that would serve working people with quality housing for decades and decades to come. Only because of his willingness to take on such a huge challenge do we have today a housing authority that serves hundreds of thousands of our fellow New Yorkers. It's because of a bold idea that was followed through. And we are humbly presenting Next Generation NYCHA in that same spirit of building on a legacy that was initiated by Mayor LaGuardia. Now, over 400,000 people depend on the Housing Authority, and it is the core, historically, the core of all the city's efforts to create affordable housing for our people. In good times and bad, NYCHA has been a constant. But something else has been constant in recent years, and unfortunately it's a uniformly bad thing. We've seen years, in fact decades, of disinvestment from the levels above us in government, from the federal government, from the state government. Not in every administration, but we certainly saw, starting especially in the early 1980s at the federal level, we saw a huge step away from commitment to affordable housing. And unfortunately, that momentum gained over the years, so that just in the years of this century, since 2001, this New York City Housing Authority has lost over $2 billion that would have been coming to it. had the previous patterns of federal and state support continued. $2 billion over the last 15 years that wasn't here to repair the buildings and help improve the quality of life of residents. And it shows. I have spent a lot of time in public housing buildings over the years. All the folks around me have as well. You can see the difference today versus 10 years ago or 20 years ago. That disinvestment has taken a toll. And we realized we had to do something fundamentally different in light of this sad trend we've seen of lack of investment from above. So many of our buildings have fallen into disrepair, and we don't find that an acceptable situation. We believe that there are tools we can use in new ways and powerful ways to address these problems. This is, at this moment, the worst financial crisis in the history of NYCHA. That's what these years of disinvestment have taken us to. And I say that with pain. I wish I did not have to say that to my fellow New Yorkers, but this is literally the worst financial crisis that NYCHA has ever encountered. And we've watched carefully over these last 16 months trying to figure out a way forward and recognizing the trend is so clear that something very different had to be done. Let me give you a clear picture of just how bad it is, because we want to level with people about the extent of the problem. Right now, given how our buildings have aged, obviously many, many buildings over a half-century old, there are nearly $17 billion in unmet capital needs for our housing authority buildings. All types of repairs that need to be done for the long haul, and the resources have not been there. But even if you think about the day-to-day operating expenses of NYCHA, just getting by, just having enough for the housing authority to make ends meet, that has become increasingly challenging as well as we've seen less federal commitment in particular. Right now, NYCHA has approximately 1 month of surplus cash on hand, 1 month. And after that, would go into deficit. It's clear that if we don't take a fundamentally different path, there is the looming danger, which has happened to other housing authorities around the country, of going into federal receivership. That is not something that we will allow to happen here, but it has happened in other places where the warning signs were not recognized in time and the commitment to change was not fast enough and thorough enough. Here we will make the changes, and we will make them swiftly and aggressively to ensure that we can protect our residents and the long-term strength of NYCHA. What have we done just in the last 16 months? Well, we took a tax payment that NYCHA had to make to the City of New York since 1949, and we just canceled that tax payment. There's no reason that our housing authority should have to shell out money it doesn't have to pay the City of New York. We've canceled that with the support of the City Council. And starting last year, we relieved NYCHA the responsibility to pay for policing by the NYPD. And we have made that a permanent change as part of the $210 million that we have spent already on safety improvements for NYCHA and relieving NYCHA's budgetary stress. And I want to make very clear, NYCHA will not, on my watch, and I think I can speak for the Council Speaker and the Council members as well, on our watch, NYCHA will never have to pay for police services, and NYCHA will never have to pay taxes to the City of New York. These efforts are working. We targeted much of our investment into some of the developments that had some of the biggest challenges with safety. And in those developments, we already have seen since last year a 10% drop in violent crime. The investments are working, and I want to thank the men and women of the NYPD, and I want to thank Chief Secreto for your great leadership. It's working. We've committed $300 million in capital funds for major repairs. We're particularly focused on the roofs of our buildings, which are the core of so many other problems, and on security concerns. That's what we did up until today, but now a whole new phase begins with Next Generation NYCHA. It goes much farther, uses every tool we have at our disposal to address the challenges of the Housing Authority and make this organization sustainable for the long haul. This plan will save over 10 years $4.6 billion in capital needs, a huge game-changing amount given the challenges that NYCHA face. $4.6 billion will be saved in capital needs. And on the expense side of the NYCHA budget, in the course of this plan, we will generate a surplus of $230 million over the next decade. So we're going from an organization that's 1 month away from going over the edge in terms of its expense budget to one that over the next decade will produce a $230 million surplus. By the way, if we didn't step in now and right the ship in terms of the expense budget of NYCHA, if the deficits just kept building and building and you added up 10 years' worth of expense deficits, it would add up to $2.5 billion by 10 years from now. That's how bad the situation is if not addressed right now. How do we make these changes? It's going to take a lot of work. They will be fast. They will be bold. There's a 15-point plan to accomplish two basic things. The first, to stabilize and sustain NYCHA. To do that, we have to diversify the funding streams of NYCHA. We have to generate new revenue. We're going to use every tool we have, and at the same time, ensure that NYCHA is working hand in hand with our overall goals for creating and preserving affordable housing for this city. All of these pieces go together. Protecting NYCHA for the long haul is one of the most fundamental things we can do to keep this city affordable. We also have to fulfill our goal of building and preserving 200,000 units. So these two pieces will work hand in hand. To begin with, there will be 10,000 new units of affordable housing created on underutilized and unutilized NYCHA property, 10,000 units in buildings that will be 100% affordable. On other properties, we will create mixed income units, or mixed income buildings. These will be buildings that are 50% affordable, 50% market. The affordable buildings will be available, the affordable elements of these buildings, the affordable units, will be available to lower income families making no more than $46,000 a year. We know that in this process, we will not only greatly increase the amount of affordable housing in communities that need it and use this land effectively to address community concerns, we'll also be able to generate new revenue for NYCHA for its dire needs. This plan will generate approximately $500 million in resources for NYCHA to address its ongoing capital and expense needs. That $500 million will be a game changer for a housing authority that's been starved of funds for a long time. So this plan will fundamentally allow us to improve and strengthen the housing authority while creating a great deal more affordable housing. It will contribute a crucial piece of our affordable housing plan. Almost 5% of all the units that we create and preserve will be through this plan. Now, the vision is clear. When we find an appropriate site to develop, we will do so when we can reach those affordable housing goals, and when we can ensure there will be a significant return for NYCHA and for the developments immediately around the site, particularly the development, obviously, that the site is located in. We want to ensure that any new development helps the residents of the surrounding buildings. And these new resources can go a long way to do things like fix elevators, improve security, improve roofs. We want to make sure those resources are there for the surrounding community. We also will make sure that when we get this new revenue, we're working with residents to determine what they believe are the key concerns and needs for their buildings. This is a process. I want to thank our chair. I'll introduce her in a moment, but she's really worked with great energy over the last 16 months, meeting with residents, listening to their concerns, helping them understand some of the things that we could do, and taking back their ideas about what will work. And that's going to continue. I think the chair has done a great job at listening and connecting with people and developments all over the city, and that will continue as we develop these plans further. Now, we also need more revenue for NYCHA, and we are going to take advantage of opportunities at the federal level, new forms of federal subsidy that we think we can use in this day and age more effectively to provide revenue for NYCHA. We also have to make the NYCHA operation in general more modern, more streamlined. We will reduce costs. We'll partner with other city agencies. We're going to take some of the obligations that NYCHA now has and take it off their hands and other city agencies will handle some of the key administrative functions like the call center and the fleet maintenance. So that's all one bucket of stabilizing and sustaining NYCHA. The second, we've got to have a better quality of life for our residents. It's long overdue. And we have to provide more service. We have to provide better and faster repairs. This is an issue that I've worked on for quite a while, including back to my time as public advocate. I know my colleagues in the City Council care deeply about improving the quality of service to residents. One of the things we're going to do is give the local development managers much more freedom to make decisions, to use their budgets effectively and to hire staff so we can do things more quickly for the residents. We're going to have a new repair tracking system, which will create more accountability on repairs to be made. Will literally give residents the ability to go online and see what the status of the repairs they're waiting for their building or their unit are. Our goal, starting with a set of developments over the next year and then expanding out throughout all the developments of the Housing Authority, is to set a one-week timeline for basic, straightforward repairs, a one-week timeline. We think that's what NYCHA residents deserve. We're going to do a lot to improve social services for residents, to make sure they get more support from city agencies and nonprofits that they deserve. We know there's so many pieces to this equation, and you'll see this took most of a year and a half to develop. And you'll see what a detailed and sophisticated plan is, because the folks who worked on it, led by the chair, put a lot of pieces together to transform the lives of residents. It will take a lot more work from this point on. To deal with a crisis of this magnitude and do a plan like this over 10 years will take a lot of work, a lot of cooperation, a lot of teamwork with residents, with community members, with other city agencies, obviously with City Hall and NYCHA working hand in hand. And that's an important point for me to end on before I turn to my colleagues. We and City Hall believe we have an absolute obligation to support NYCHA in this transformation. The buck stops with me at City Hall. We have got to get this right. And it's our obligation to relieve, as we've done already, some of the unfair burdens placed on NYCHA in the past, and to support NYCHA as it goes through this positive transformation. I believe that NYCHA began as a national model. I believe it began as an idea that was so powerful because it was a place for hardworking people to find a decent home in the midst of an economic crisis. Well, today we find ourselves in a different kind of economic crisis for so many of our families, and they need that decent home. They need it to be protected, and this plan will achieve it for all who live in the Housing Authority. Let me just say a few words in Spanish before I introduce the chair. Hoy anunciamos el Plan Próxima Generación de NYCHA. Este plan ayudará a NYCHA a salir de su crisis financiera y mejorar la calidad de vida de sus residentes. El futuro de nuestra vivienda pública está en peligro. Este plan busca preservar y mejorar la calidad de NYCHA para las generaciones futuras. With that, again, deep appreciation to the chair for her extraordinary work, and I want to thank your soon-to-be new member of the family for waiting just long enough. Chair Shola Olatoye.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor. Welcome to Johnson Houses. This is an incredibly proud moment for us. We are so pleased to share Next Generation NYCHA, our 10-year strategic plan for the authority. As is custom, an effort like this involves many hands. And I would be remiss to not acknowledge my fellow NYCHA board members, EDC President Kyle Kimball, Victor Gonzalez, Ms. Beatrice Bird, Ms. Willie Mae Lewis, Richard Barron, and Derek Cephas, who have been with us step by step as we've developed this plan together with our residents and broader community stakeholders. Although our resident association president, Ms. Ethel Velez, couldn't be here today, she's actually at a leadership conference with a number of our resident leaders, I'd like to acknowledge the hard work that she's put in as an advocate here in East Harlem on behalf of her neighbors and the broader community. The same can be said about our partner, Mr. Reginald Bowman, president of the NYCHA Citywide Council of Presidents and resident of Sethlo Houses, who's with us here today as well. And all of our leaders in government who have been with us from the beginning. I want to thank the mayor and Deputy Mayor Glenn, who've made public housing a priority from the moment that I sat with them in the fall of 2013. This administration's unprecedented focus and investment in NYCHA has gotten this plan off the ground and will make it a success. Thank you, Mayor, for committing $100 million in capital for roof replacement and an additional $200 million over the next 2 years. With the support of the Speaker and the entire City Council, we'll start with 66 buildings this year. This protects the health of our residents and their buildings and reduces NYCHA's operating cost. You also recently announced the elimination of the pilot, the $33 million that NYCHA pays to the city every year in lieu of taxes, a practice that dates back to 1949 and that is not applied to any other affordable housing owner in the city. Along with the relief of the NYPD payments, these millions of dollars will go a long way in service to our residents. I must thank our government, nonprofit, and community partners, many of whom are here today, as we take on this crucial mission of preserving public housing for the next generation. That includes our colleagues from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, represented by Luigi Duncano today. Again, great partners from our Secretariat, Julian Castro, and our fearless New York administrative leader, Holly Light. I have to thank the more than 11,210, to be exact, NYCHA staff who do the hard work every day to improve the quality of life for New Yorkers. And a big, big shout out to my leadership team who have worked round the clock to put this plan together with so much input from across the city. And finally, I have to thank our residents. Your input, enthusiasm, and critical questions have been integral to establishing our priorities, formulating our vision for the future, and pulling this plan together. But as the mayor said, we're not stopping here. More than 5,000 people have provided valuable input in hundreds of conversations, from the listening tour that kicked off on my first day, to town halls, to community visioning sessions at Ingersoll, Millbrook, and Van Dyke houses, to my coffee talks with employees. For more than 81 years, NYCHA, the country's largest public housing authority, has enabled millions of low and moderate income New Yorkers to build a better life. My grandmother was one of them, with the safe, secure, and affordable housing as their foundation. Today, more than 400,000 New Yorkers call NYCHA home, including 200,000 seniors and children. We also administer the country's largest Section 8 program, providing 213,000 people with federal rental vouchers. And in a city where the median rent is more than $2,900 a month, there are over 200,000 families on the NYCHA wait list, drawn by the promise that their rent will never exceed 30% of their income. But the promise of NYCHA in our city is under serious threat. Billions in underfunding from all levels of government and aging buildings has resulted in an annual deficit in the tens of millions of dollars and nearly $17 billion in unmet capital needs. And that means a diminished quality of life for our residents, leaking roofs, unreliable heating systems, and broken elevators. To deal with these funding shortfalls and to stay solvent, we've been forced to draw on our reserves, divert funds from badly needed building repairs. Continuing on this path is not acceptable. And if we do, we stand the potential to lose NYCHA's 328 developments. To overcome this crisis, the worst in our history, as the mayor said, NYCHA must make some tough decisions, and we must change. No one knows this better than our residents. To that end, the mayor gave me 2 charges back in his office in fall of 2014 when he appointed me. He said, go and reset a series of relationships with your key stakeholders and create a long-term sustainable plan for NYCHA's future. So we got to work on what we coined Next Generation NYCHA, both a process and a plan that will bring NYCHA back from the brink and ensure that it remains a pathway to opportunity for families today and tomorrow. Next Generation NYCHA is organized around 4 key goals: financial sustainability, to become an effective owner of housing, rebuild public housing and affordable housing, and engaging our residents in a new way. Our plan will reduce our capital needs by $4.6 billion and generate $230 million in surplus over the next 10 years. If we stick to the status quo, as the mayor said, we'd be confronting a 10-year, $2.5 billion deficit instead. NextGen incorporates 15 strategies, some of which you've heard today: generating new revenue by wisely investing in the financial support from the city, becoming a more modern 21st century housing operator, improving customer service, removing layers of unhelpful bureaucracy, supporting Housing New York, the mayor's plan to secure 200,000 units of affordable housing. Next Generation NYCHA is also about reorganizing the authority to push more resources to our front lines. To that end, NYCHA will cut expenses by shrinking the central office workforce through the integration of administrative and support functions into other city agencies. Next Gen NYCHA is about preserving distressed public housing by utilizing every possible federal tool to renovate and upgrade apartments while ensuring residents have permanent affordability and long-term tenant rights. In all cases, NYCHA retains an ownership share and decision-making authority. As the mayor mentioned, we'll be launching our first mobile app in July so that residents can schedule maintenance work on their smartphones. You can still call the call center in the interim, and we'll keep updates on that as that develops. It's about establishing new public-private partnerships such as this center, such as the Doorways to Opportunity, a new NYCHA city collaboration that provides residents with access to employment, job training, and financial counseling. As we make progress with our strategic plan, we will report out on a quarterly basis. We will work with stakeholders at every step of the way. We will continue to gather feedback and input, continuously refining Next Gen NYCHA. Please stay informed by visiting our website, reading the NYCHA Journal, the newly released NYCHA Journal, and follow us on Twitter. You can also send your ideas to nextgennycha@nycha.nyc.gov or reach out to your development property managers or your resident association. Thank you to everyone who has helped us strengthen this vital resource for our communities and our city. Onward. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've had tremendous support over this last 16 months from the City Council and all the efforts we've made to shore up and strengthen NYCHA. And I can tell you that the City Council has constantly focused our attentions on the needs of public housing residents, and no one more so than a City Council member who has one of the greatest concentrations of public housing anywhere in the country in her district, and happens to be the Speaker of the City Council, Melissa Mark Viverito.
Buenas tardes. I have to say I'm extremely proud to be standing here today as a member who has now been in the council for 9.5 years, 1.5 under this new administration, 8 years under a prior administration. The level of personal investment that you have given to this challenge, Mayor, is unprecedented. And as someone that has stood vocally and forcefully in the council to really challenge the administration on really looking holistically and having a long-term vision for the viability of this critical housing stock in this city, which is the cornerstone of affordable housing in the city of New York, is really, really a great day to be standing here to finally get that validation. And obviously this is not without difficulties and challenges, as we all know. There's a lot of work yet to do because it is an extremely dire situation. But the fact that we do have an administration that is demonstrating an all-hands-on-deck moment and saying that we all have to put in our efforts and our thoughts into figuring out how we sustain for the future this affordable housing is critical. And I am really, really proud to be standing here. So for too long, New Yorkers living in NYCHA public housing developments have been treated like second-class citizens, made to wait unreasonable amounts of time for the most basic repairs or improvements. We're here today in my district at the James Weldon Johnson houses, and as has been said, my council district in East Harlem and the South Bronx has the most public housing in New York City. That's 45,881 residents in 19,346 households. That's about 12% of the stock of NYCHA. My constituents have often reached out to my office about the repair issues and serious quality of life concerns that impact their day-to-day lives. Sometimes even the most basic repairs and improvements can take months, and there is often very little recourse for residents who are simply trying to make their communities a better place to call home. We know that NYCHA is in the worst financial position in its history, and it's the residents, unfortunately, who pay the price. It's clear that New York City needs a new, innovative vision for the future of the New York City Housing Authority. We need to think critically about how to meet the daily needs of New Yorkers in public housing, and at the same time, address NYCHA's long-term sustainability and viability as the cornerstone of affordable housing.
This report that Lorraine is okay. She just needed some water, and she's sitting down comfortably now.
Yes.
And it was not a comment on the proposal. So, now, Speaker, continue.
And Lorraine is my constituent. She lives in the next development over, so obviously get very concerned. And she's been an incredible advocate for public housing as well, not only here in the city of New York, in the East Harlem, but in the city of New York. So thank you, Lorraine. Yeah. Whew, that scared me a little bit.
You thought it was going to be me, right?
I told Shola, the only surprise we want here today is this proposal. No more surprises, please. So we know about the need to look and make NYCHA viable in the long term. The New York City Council is a staunch advocate for NYCHA residents and NYCHA's long-term survival. In fiscal 2015, the City Council provided over $27 million for security-related projects and another $15 million for infrastructure improvements. In addition, the Council continued its Painters Apprenticeship Program, providing $8 million to offer NYCHA residents the opportunity to apprentice for professional painters while assisting in the maintenance of NYCHA developments citywide. The Council has also provided $17.1 million for NYCHA's operating budget, keeping 24 community centers and 33 senior centers open. So this demonstrates the level of commitment that we've had over the years, and we're really committed to continue that moving forward in providing infrastructure improvements. We need to be bold, and we need to think outside the box, and Next Generation NYCHA does just that. The administration's plan thoroughly assesses the very real needs of our city's public housing stock and listens to the voices of those who know these developments best, the New Yorkers who call NYCHA home. Next Generation NYCHA will harness our city's resources to infuse NYCHA developments with the upgrades they need: faster repairs, better security, and improved services, all while reducing capital needs and increasing operating funds. This proposal not only seeks to repair, it reimagines our public housing to ensure that it is preserved for generations to come. with interconnected approaches for ensuring NYCHA's financial stability, expanding affordable housing, and increasing resident access to economic and social empowerment programs. In the absence of adequate federal support, it's up to New York City to mobilize and prioritize the tools at our disposal to revitalize NYCHA and ensure its long-term sustainability. Unlike in previous administrations, we have seen meaningful and fruitful efforts to engage NYCHA residents and local elected officials in the development of this proposal, ensuring that the community has an ongoing seat at the table and an integral role in making sure the plan works on the ground. For New York City to succeed, residents in public housing must be seen as contributors to that process and that success. The Council is committed to investing in our city's public housing, and I thank the administration for supporting NYCHA and its residents. I look forward to working together to ensure that NYCHA gets the resources it deserves. And very quickly in Spanish. Por demasiado tiempo, los neoyorquinos que viven en los proyectos de vivienda pública de New York City Housing Authority, de NYCHA, han sido tratados como ciudadanos de segunda categoría, haciéndolos esperar tiempos irrazonables para que le hagan las más básicas mejoras o reparaciones. El Consejo Municipal de la Ciudad de Nueva York es un defensor férreo de los residentes de NYCHA, trayendo atención a los asuntos de infraestructura, resiliencia y servicios sociales. El plan de la Administración para la siguiente generación se encargará de mejorar estos asuntos y atender las necesidades de las personas que viven en estos complejos de viviendas públicas. Este plan logrará reparaciones más rápidas, mayor seguridad y mejores servicios. El Consejo está comprometido en invertir en la vivienda pública de nuestra ciudad y agradezco a la Administración por apoyar NYCHA y sus residentes. Trabajaremos juntos para que NYCHA reciba los recursos que se merece. Okay, thank you very much. And I'm really proud to stand here with two of my colleagues, Corey Johnson and the chair of our Public Housing Committee, Richie Torres, who grew up in public housing, and we could not have a more stronger stand-up voice on behalf of public housing residents in the city of New York, and the chair of our Public Housing Committee. So with that, Richie Torres.
I'm reminded I'm not as tall as the mayor. But Madam Speaker, it's an honor to be the Public Housing Chair under your leadership. And I want to commend the mayor for putting forward a bold plan that rises above the politics of the moment and takes the long view on what is best for the survival of public housing. The mayor could have taken a much easier path. He could have done the politically expedient thing, but instead he chose to do the right thing, and that is something for which you deserve enormous credit. The mayor's plan contains painful choices, and the choices are painful because there is no painless way of addressing a $17 billion capital need. There is no painless way of addressing an operating deficit that is spiraling out of control. NYCHA's deficit is expected to rise to over $400 million within a decade. And if we do nothing, or if we do too little, the Housing Authority will collapse under the weight of its own financial insolvency. So we have an obligation, a moral obligation, to stabilize the New York City Housing Authority. Between Section 8 and public housing, there are over 600,000 New Yorkers who depend on NYCHA's stability for their own stability, for their own housing. And we owe it to each and every one of them to do everything that we can to preserve their homes. That, to me, is our collective mission. It is doable, and it is doable because we have a mayor and a speaker and a NYCHA chairperson and a NYCHA team who are wholeheartedly committed to getting the job done. Mr. Mayor, I will stand with you as a partner. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Another strong supporter of public housing, and he's here with us today, is my colleague, Councilmember Corey Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Madam Chair, and Deputy Mayor Glenn, who I know has spent an enormous amount of time on this. Bold leadership requires tough choices. And this plan, as my colleague, the amazing Richie Torres, just said, is going to be painful for some. But what is painful in the short term, the bitter pill that may need to be swallowed in the short term, is good for the overall health of NYCHA, in the overall health, future, and well-being of our city. And I think what is demonstrated here today by this mayor and by this chair and by our deputy mayor has been an enormous amount of time and focus and energy in coming up with a plan that works. And what I mean by that is what we saw 2.5 years ago, was we're going to do infills all over the city. It's going to be 80-20 buildings, and we're not going to talk to the public housing residents who it's going to affect. That is not what this plan is. This plan engages local residents. It prioritizes housing that's going to be built at those developments for NYCHA residents. It puts capital money back into those developments. This is a solid plan. It is a thoughtful plan. It is a plan that was not easy to make, but is one that we must all get behind. And I am very proud to stand behind it today with this mayor. Thank you.
With deepest respect for my colleagues in government, I will say the phrase, "we save the best for last," because we are going to hear from two people who can tell you a lot about what it means to live in public housing and how important it is to their lives and to the people in their lives. First, I want you to hear from Naji Cook. Naji is a resident of Long Island Baptist Houses in Brooklyn, and she is an epitome, I think, of what NYCHA has meant historically for good, hardworking people who needed the stability, who needed the lifeline that NYCHA has been so they could get their life on a good and sustainable course. This has been true for generations in this city. The names have changed, the waves of people coming through the city have changed, but one constant has been that NYCHA has been a rock of stability for hardworking New Yorkers building a better life. Let's hear from Naji Cook.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me here today. So the first time that I resided in NYCHA housing was back in 2004 with my birth mom. And I lived there because we were in a shelter, and we were in a shelter for about 2 or 3 years, and then we were awarded the apartment. I lived with her there for about 3 years before entering the foster care system. Once I entered foster care, I must have been to about 5 different placements before graduating high school and going off to college. And I thought my life had changed and things were going great. But I aged out of foster care my 3rd year in college. I was 21 years old, and it was time to move on out of foster care. And I was then again faced with the challenge of homelessness because I didn't have anywhere to go. I couldn't go back to my group home or to my foster home. I had to find somewhere to live. And as you could imagine, being a college student and worrying about finals and about, the next exam that I have to take or the next paper that I have to write, thinking about homelessness was the last thing that I wanted on my mind. But I tried to tell myself not to worry about it and that things would get better. And, I'd deal with that when it was time. And one day I was checking my emails just as a routine, and I got an email from NYCHA saying that I was being awarded an apartment and that I could come and look at it, and if I liked it, that it would be mine. And I was so excited, and I was jumping up and down. And I called my friend, and I'm like, I have a home, I have an apartment. I was so happy because before that, I didn't know where I would be going. I'm like, am I going to graduate and, sign myself into a shelter? And so I am grateful to NYCHA for that. And I am grateful for many things that NYCHA has offered me during my time living in the NYCHA development that I live in. However, I do recognize as a resident that NYCHA does have problems. This past winter, I went about 6 months with no hot water. And I was happy that when they finally came to fix it, but I was like, I wish I didn't have to speak to 10 different people and put in so many tickets just to get my hot water fixed, only to get it fixed 6 months later. And also there's urine in the elevators. I wish that I didn't have to walk into an elevator that smells of urine. And so, but NYCHA, First Gen NYCHA is fixing that problem. They have a plan to put cameras in the facility so that they can make it a safer place and also make it a comfortable place, a place that we are proud to live. NYCHA residents are proud to live, and a place where we can say that this is my home, and we have dignity in making that statement. So I am honored also to be here supporting this plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations. Well done. Najee, thank you so much. It means a lot to all of us. You would tell us your story, and it's such a powerful story. But I think we can all agree your future is very bright. Do we agree? Finally, I want to let you hear from someone who I've known for many years as a great advocate for public housing residents. And times have often been tough, and residents have needed people who would stand up and fight for them and challenge the conventionalism and challenge the bureaucracies. And Reggie Bowman's done that for many, many years with great energy and great force. And residents all over the city respect his leadership and appreciate it. Reggie Bowman, the president of the Citywide Council of Tenant Presidents.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I'd like to say that this is a moment in history that is a long time coming, and I'd like to publicly thank the mayor and the chair, the board of NYCHA, and all those elected officials, the city council president, Chairman Torres, and all those of you who are residents here today for being a part of this moment of history and time. I think it's important to call this a blueprint for restoring the fiscal infrastructure and fiscal soundness of the landmark of NYCHA. And as the mayor pointed out so clearly, Mayor Fiorello, so long ago, had the vision and the foresight to put something in place that would be a historic and long-term investment in one of the most important things in this city, which is the people who build the infrastructure and the economy and are so much a part of this thriving thing that we call New York. Every great architectural achievement starts with a blueprint. And it's my belief that the Next Gen NYCHA plan was conceived and started before the mayor took office and he began listening to what was needed to restore public housing. Now, you've heard everybody say and applaud the mayor and the city council for doing something that was unprecedented, which was investing millions of dollars back into public housing after it had been disinvested in for so long. And I think we owe them a tremendous gratitude, and let's give them a round of applause for sticking up for and standing up for us in public housing. He also realized the necessity to make substantial capital and operational infrastructure investment in NYCHA and its facilities and its operations to restore the infrastructure of this landmark for its residents and all of New York. It is also my belief that if applied, the strategies presented in Next Gen NYCHA represent the blueprint for the first steps in this process. What I'm here to do today, in addition to thanking you in behalf of all the residents that I represent in the Citywide Council, is asking all resident leaders, all interest groups, all elected officials, public and private interests to join us in this initiative. As a resident and someone who's familiar with NYCHA and its decades-long attempt to operate successfully in the midst of the challenges, one thing is certain: we cannot move NYCHA forward by constantly excavating the past of NYCHA and fighting over NYCHA for political points and interest group agendas. NYCHA first belongs to its residents, and we must today move forward as residents and New Yorkers, political and private interests alike, to act now as a team and restore this NYCHA one step at a time for its residents and the future before time renders the buildings of NYCHA structurally unfit for us to live in. The Next Gen Plan of NYCHA and its key strategies are a blueprint for change. They're also an opportunity for all of us as stakeholders to work from a practical blueprint as a team, to use applied strategies to restore the NYCHA property portfolio, infrastructure, and operations. NYCHA can only be restored by a 21st century blueprint, applied strategic planning, and property management skills and practical investment of public and private resources. And that's what this plan represents. You cannot keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results. And it's time for us to step into the future and take our developments and our communities and our city into that future that we so much deserve. Again, it is my belief that after careful review and application, this blueprint represents a chance to improve and provide a gold standard of daily services to every resident in all 178,000 plus units of the NYCHA property portfolio, and a strategic plan to repair and restore our aging infrastructure. So finally, this Next Gen Plan and its goals shall be accomplished by the already evident commitment of the residents of public housing, the NYCHA administration, the mayor, the governor, the president of the city council, federal, state, and local political leadership to work as a team to put the resources in place to restore the landmark of public housing for its residents and the city of New York. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will take questions on topic, followed by questions off topic. Emily.
May I ask perhaps Chair Latoye about what I think the
Impressive pronunciation, Emily.
mine is also very hard to pronounce.
There you go.
The bitter pill that the council members spoke about. What are some ways you're going to go about updating procedures to modernize rent collection or increase rent collection?
So the question was about rent collection. So one of the NYCHA is about housing. We are about housing people, and one of the largest sources of revenue that we have is through our rent collection. We also recognize that because we have to improve services to residents to do that. So one of the things that we have done using data is looking at how and when people actually pay rent and adjusting some of our own internal procedures about when rent is due, making it easier for residents to pay multiple times a month, making it available for automatic deposit and things online, really trying to make it as seamless as possible for residents to meet their rental obligation. And then also coordinating and working very closely with our city agencies for families who are on public assistance like HRA, and really ensuring that there's a seamless connection between their policies around supporting families who are on public assistance and paying their rent to the Housing Authority.
Very quickly, Mayor, you were a critic of the previous mayor's infill plan. You have a plan that looks very, very similar to his, perhaps a higher ratio of affordable housing.
Perhaps. I would say quite a higher ratio. I appreciate the editorialization in the question. You're very good at that. This is a very different plan.
Is increasing density at these developments a good way of avoiding a lot of social problems?
Okay. This is a very different plan than was presented in the past, and my colleagues can speak to this as well. So let's deal with the facts. The previous plan was built on an 80-20 model, 80% market housing, 20% affordable housing. This plan is based on two models, 100% affordable housing and 50-50. And in the 50% model, that 50% will be, again, for families that make $46,000 a year or less. So very much connected to the reality of so many families in this city today. Our plan explicitly addresses creating job opportunities for NYCHA residents as a result of this housing development. Our plan explicitly indicates the $500 million that will go back to NYCHA to shore up its finances, but particularly benefit the developments surrounding where we will be doing this work. So I think this is the kind of change we have needed for a long time, and it does respond to the many things that there were concerns raised about over the last years that were missing in the previous plan. Please.
Add with this, because the way it's written here, it says that you are exploring on the 50-50.
Yep.
And however, you also are saying that you have the 10,000, I think it's 10,000 with 100%. Am I correct?
The plan is for 10,000 units, 100% affordable, meaning in 100% affordable buildings, and then the 50-50 units as well, which will be about 3,500 affordable units. But the next step will be in August, when we identify the first specific sites that we believe are ready to begin the development process. And we'll obviously begin that by sitting down with residents of the development and talk about the specific plans.
A specific, there's a reference here to high-value land.
Again,
At this point?
Again, what we'll do in August is announce specific sites that are ready. We have a lot of potential sites, but we don't have a firm, specific set to begin with. We'll announce those in August, and it will come in waves, both the 50-50 model and the 100% model.
Mayor, Najee spoke very eloquently about having to fill out 6 or 8 tickets just to get her hot water fixed over a period of 6 months. I know that part of this plan is to move the communication system to 311, if I'm not mistaken, instead of to a centralized NYCHA call center. Are you concerned at all that, however well-intentioned that might be, it might overload 311 and decrease services for non-NYCHA New Yorkers?
I would be concerned if we weren't watching that like a hawk. We need the response to be better on repairs. And obviously, one of the first things that happened when we ended the practice of charging NYCHA for police services was to devote some of that money to speeding up repairs, and that was very effective. And we're going to continue in that vein. That 7-day standard, again, it will start in some developments in the short term, but we want to build that out over the next couple of years to be the standard for the basic repairs, not the very, very complicated repairs, but the basic repairs that so many residents need. We believe a 7-day standard for those repairs is appropriate, so much so that we'll be tracking them online publicly and giving tenants the ability to track their individual repairs. So the point is, we believe that the 311 system can very effectively handle that, but more to the underlying point, we have got to stabilize the finances of the Housing Authority. Or, you know who will suffer? The residents of the Housing Authority. If we don't get this right, the people who live in public housing will suffer. This is one of the ways with shifting the calls to 311 that we think we can find cost savings for NYCHA that then can be plowed back into the everyday work of the Housing Authority. Either one of you want to add? No, good. Okay.
Mayor, what would you say if
back there first.
in Spanish as well?
I don't know if I can do the answer in Spanish, but if either Melissa or Richie, how's your Spanish? Melissa. Melissa is nominated. Whatever the question is on any topic, Melissa's about to answer it in Spanish. Get ready.
Some residents that are concerned because they have seen their rents go up and they're paying more fees for parking and other services, and they're concerned that this plan will effectively pass the buck to them, and they will have to shore up more money.
Well, I'll start. Can I start in English, okay? All right, I'll pass to you. In many, many developments around the city, where the typical parking fee, for example, is $26 a month, which is obviously well below anything that would be available on the open market. In that instance, in most parts of the city, it would go up about $60 a month. So to be right now about 26 would go up to about 86 a month. Obviously, again, much more affordable than other options typically are. Also, relatively few NYCHA residents have vehicles to begin with. It's I think, what was our quote?
About 59, about half of our spaces are occupied.
Right, but how many residents per se? I remember seeing this number before. We'll check that. We'll give you that number. It's a very small number out of 400,000 plus people. And, but we think this is the kind of thing that will be necessary, again, to shore up the fundamental financial reality of the Housing Authority so we can benefit the residents. Would you like to?
Se entiende que van a haber aquellos residentes que van a estar en contra de ciertos aspectos de este plan, pero lo que estamos tratando de hacer como ciudad, y este alcalde hay que darle mucho crédito, es que tenemos que estabilizar nuestra vivienda pública, que sabemos que falta mucho trabajo dentro de esa vivienda pública donde la gente vive. Se entiende que hay reparaciones que son necesarias y que desafortunadamente han vivido muchos años con una calidad de vida sumamente comprometida. Así que se entiende que para llegar a un punto de estabilizar esta vivienda pública vamos a tener, y esta ciudad va a tener que hacer unas decisiones, unas propuestas que posiblemente no sean aceptadas por los residentes, pero también hay unos aspectos de este plan que son sumamente importantes para la viabilidad hacia el futuro de la vivienda pública de Nueva York. Y así que dentro del plan que se ha presentado hoy va a tener que haber un tipo de educación al nivel de los residentes, ir vivienda pública por vivienda pública para asegurar de que la gente entienda todos aspectos del plan y escuchar una vez más las preocupaciones que tengan. Pero sí, creo que hay un reconocimiento aquí que hay ciertos aspectos que la gente va a rechazar, pero que es importante para el futuro de la vivienda pública de Nueva York tomar estas decisiones.
Just on the previous question, sorry it took us a moment to check our notes. Now, 10,000 parking permits are currently in effect for NYCHA residents, again, out of over 400,000 people. So it's a relatively small number who will be affected, but again, their spaces will be guaranteed. But over the next few years, that cost will go up, again, in most places quite modestly. Dana.
Thank you. Your plan includes a lot more affordable housing than Bloomberg's, but it also projects more revenue generation than Bloomberg. So how does that work? How can you include more affordable housing in the infill and also create more revenue?
Well, again, this is based on us analyzing a market today and the possibilities today of what we thought made sense. I don't know if Shola or Alicia, if you want to make a star turn to describe this this particular formula, but it is based on current market conditions. You want to add? Okay.
So our plan has multiple components, and with regard to the rebuild piece, there's the new construction, and then there's the 50-50 scenario, as well as a preservation scenario. And so when you take all of the projected revenues of those three components, we actually do see a fair amount of revenues to the authority, as well as, and I think this is a really important part, is we're reducing our capital need, which is ultimately why we do all of this. We chart a path to financial sustainability so that NYCHA can, by the end of 2017, deal with the larger, what by at that point we estimate will be about a $10 billion capital need. And so that's why we do this, so that we can really tackle, buildings that half of our buildings are over the age of 50, and that's the reason why Next Generation NYCHA is so critical.
How do you ensure that a plan that still leaves a $10 billion gap doesn't continue to lead to deterioration?
I'll start, and Shola can join in. Look, we're trying to recognize that which we know we can achieve. And it's very similar to the view we take about our affordable housing plan in general. 200,000 units built or preserved is the outer limit of what we knew we could get our hands on and achieve. Now, we will keep fighting for a different reality, particularly in Washington when it comes to affordable housing. And I am adamant, and again, I borrow strongly from the great example of Fiorello LaGuardia on this front, too, that we have to change the national debate on affordable housing and infrastructure, and the federal government has to be much more of a key contributor again. I hold out the hope, if we do that well, and if we join with cities around the country, that we might be able to get more of the resources we have long been waiting for, and that would be a big game change in the whole picture. But this is what we believe we can reach, and clearly what's going to happen is we're going to make the choices as to where to put the resources where the need is greatest and how to sustain ourselves over these next 10 years, looking for opportunities to do better thereafter. Right, just to be clear, media? Okay, I'm sorry, we're just doing, I believe you, but we just got to do media first, then we'll hear from others, okay?
Let me ask a quick question.
Wait, you had one. Let me just get back to others who haven't gone in, then we will come back around.
Hi, I was curious about the staff aspect of this. If I understand it correctly, it talks about reducing the staff partly through attrition and partly through shifting it to other city agencies. So how does that end up saving money to the city in the long run?
Again, we have a reality where NYCHA has its own budget, has for decades. And we need to relieve pressure on that budget. That's why we stopped requiring the police payment. That's why we've stopped requiring the payment in lieu of taxes. And when we identify services that we can provide effectively, like the call center activity going to 311 or the fleet maintenance, that is one way that we can take costs off of NYCHA right away. We also know that some of the personnel that NYCHA's had in the past we won't be able to support in terms of some of the administrative personnel. And so we are going to ensure that the work keeps happening, but not on NYCHA's payroll. Yes.
On the 50.
Hold on, was it? Go ahead.
On the 50-50 proposal, how many sites are you possibly targeting for the 50-50 proposal? And would there be any limitations on development that can happen there? Can someone build luxury condos?
The only model we will accept is either the 100% affordable building or the 50-50 model, 50% market, 50% affordable. And again, that 50% affordable, all units at 60% of area median income or below, roughly translates to $46,000 for a family of 3, which is a typical NYCHA family.
The other 50% of the units?
The other 50% would be market, but the whole point here is there's only 2 development models. There's no such thing as a standalone just market. We're not looking at 80-20. There's only 2 models. Either buildings are 100% affordable or they're 50-50.
Limitations on the market rate apartments. Can they be pretty much anything on the 50%? Could people charge for anything for those? Or?
It'll be market, whatever the market will bear. Yeah.
Targeted?
Again, we're looking at dozens of sites, but we are going to have to specific a lot of work to make sure that a site will work. When we believe a site will work for either of these models, we will then publicly announce that. We'll meet with community leaders and resident leaders, and we'll go from there. Anna.
You said that a lot of NYCHA residents don't rely on those lots. On Staten Island, there is a lack of public transportation options, and there's 19 lots, and about 4 of those, 4 exactly, are full currently. So I was just wondering, like, for Staten Islanders, they rely on cars more than other citywide residents. So could you talk a little
Well,
bit
first of all, I respect the question, but I want to put again in perspective about 10,000 parking permits citywide for a total NYCHA population of over 400,000. So it's to say it's a meaningful issue, but I do want to I want it put in perspective of the overall situation. But the point is, anyone who has space will continue to have space. In most parts of the city, there will be a modest increase. But the fact is the spaces will still, of course, be prioritized for NYCHA residents who need them.
Part of the reason you rejected Bloomberg's infill proposal was you didn't get feedback or didn't get approval from NYCHA residents. Can you talk a bit about the support, how you gauge support from NYCHA residents on your infill proposal, which is different in the percentage?
Sure. And there's been obviously over the last year and a half with the chair's efforts and a lot of other people's efforts, an ongoing effort to figure out what would work for people, which is why you see a very different design than the one presented by the previous administration. I would say my colleagues here from the City Council, where people issued a lot of concerns about the previous plan, they're standing here because it's a very different plan based on their feedback. So that's going to be ongoing. When we go into a specific development and say, here's a site that we think could be utilized for one of these models, the question will be, what are some of the things that the surrounding development most needs in terms of capital investments? Obviously looking for job opportunities for people from the development. That's going to be something we do in each and every case. Let me just get everyone who hasn't had a chance. I'll give Greg one at the end, but let me just get anyone who hasn't had a chance yet. Go ahead.
Of the 1,000 central office positions that are affected, how many are going to be subject to headcount reductions? How many are going to be linked to different agencies?
I'll see if we have that breakout, but let me just give you the basic ground rule. The basic ground rule will be that people who are now in some of those administrative roles will have either another opportunity in a different city agency, or they'll have an opportunity for a buyout. So we're going to make opportunities available. There's no layoffs in this plan. We're looking for other alternatives for those workers. You want to add? Okay, yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part of the question.
So first I'm just wondering what criteria needs to be met in order to transition into Section 8, and should they transition to the same formula for calculating rents and keeping them at 30% of people's income?
So we are, and the mayor has been very clear that we need to utilize every potential federal tool at our disposal to preserve our most distressed aspects of the public housing portfolio. The criteria for some of these projects will be the state of physical deterioration. HUD actually has a very specific definition around that. We also have units that are formerly city-state units that receive absolutely no funding, so we actually cross-subsidize them now. We have a series of units that NYCHA actually inherited from the city when it was experiencing its fiscal crisis in the 70s and 80s that are not part of the typical tower in the park public housing development. So our portfolio is quite diverse, and the goal here is that we will utilize all of the tools, Section 8, as well as many others that HUD is encouraging public housing authorities to use across the country to ensure that much needed capital is delivered, that the units remain affordable permanently, and that residents do not see their rent increase beyond 30% of their total household income.
I know the speaker wanted to add.
I think the other aspect to take into account with the 1,000 employees that we're talking about, not only is it attrition, but also one aspect of it is the integration of NYCHA with existing city agencies. Right now, NYCHA has been operating kind of in a silo and on its own, yet there is some level of involvement that is needed of other city agencies. So the idea of integration so that it's more fluid and that they coordinate more closely, I think is a very creative aspect and something that I had not seen before in all the conversations we've had. So I really give credit and see how that works out, whether it's Department of Buildings or any other agency. So that's a really interesting aspect as well.
Rich, did you have one?
Mr. Mayor, some cities have given up on public housing, blown up the public housing and walked away from it. Do you see any future time when New York will have to do that?
No, we are absolutely committed to public housing for the long haul, and that's why this plan is so important. Public housing is one of the most important elements of keeping New York City affordable. It is one of the core positive realities of this city. To protect a place that for generations has helped working people have a decent home, and we're going to protect it for the long haul. That's the bottom line. Other cities went on a very different path. We don't believe in that path. We believe in protecting the public housing we have.
Where is the state of New York on all of this? And specifically, I don't know how many weeks ago it was, but you guys were all praising the governor for committing to $100 million on the roof repair. But apparently that's not really true anymore. Can you just tell me what you think about that? And then tell me what's going on with it.
Well, I'll start, and the chair wants to add. Look, the governor put forward a commitment on $100 million. We take him at his word, and we look forward to speedily acting on that. As you know from my budget testimony back in February in Albany, I made clear that we were ready to do more going forward, and we were looking for the state to match it. So we've already put in our budget $100 million for each of the next 2 years as well, and we'd like to see the state match that. Look, this is one of the areas where the state needs to do more, and again, the federal government even more on top of that. Okay, we're going to off topic. Off topic.
So there's been some discussion on Staten Island about what the next Staten Island ferry will be named, and I was wondering who you would name a new ferry after.
That is a very controversial question. And I think that my ACE communication staff would not want me to just wing it at this point, but have a thoughtful discussion. So I will come up with at least one, if not several, exciting possibilities. Marcia.
I wonder what you would say to some of your constituents who were angry that you were out of the city last week when there were important leadership challenges, public safety. There was the Amtrak crash where dozens of your constituents were injured. And I wonder what you say to them when they say that you should be here.
Mayor of New York City has to walk and chew gum at the same time. And I've talked about, again, the man I think was the greatest mayor we ever had, Fiorello LaGuardia, who started the U.S. Conference of Mayors to organize mayors from around the country to demand the policies that became a lot of the key elements of the New Deal, which we benefit from to this day. I've talked to a lot of mayors over time about this, both from this city and other cities. You can't exist in the modern nation that we are and ignore the fact that there are so many resources in Washington that we deserve and we have to fight for. I was down in Washington on Wednesday with a bipartisan coalition of mayors meeting with top leaders of the Senate and House on the need for a larger transportation bill and a long-term transportation bill. What would that mean for New York City? Well, if the president's proposal were passed, it would mean $1.2 billion more each year over 6 years. It would mean for us probably, for the metropolitan area, I should say, it would mean for New York City probably a minimum of $500 million a year. Over that 6-year plan, $3 billion to fix roads, bridges, highways, mass transit. That is worth fighting for, and that is worth going to Washington for, and it's certainly worth doing, as LaGuardia did, organizing other mayors to make that demand, and we heard from congressional leaders that that was important to them. Equally, trying to change some of the discussion in this country so we can address some of the bigger challenges facing New York City and other cities. A higher minimum wage is a key example. Progressive taxation. We can't do all the things we need on our own. We're trying with every tool we have. But listen to the story we're telling today. Well, if you wanted the federal government to get back in the affordable housing business, one of the only ways to get there is with a more progressive tax system. The Buffett rule I've talked about, proposed by Warren Buffett, that no millionaire or billionaire should pay a lower tax rate than their own secretary, for example. That is projected to net about $70 billion a year in federal revenue. That simple change were made. I think it's a change, by the way, probably a vast majority of Americans would agree with. That would make a huge impact on the federal budget and would be the kind of gateway to resources for affordable housing for New York City and other cities. So I have to fight for those things while working on issues like this right here, using our own resources to shore up our public housing. Yes?
Your budget proposal did not include, an increase in the cops, an increase in police officers. Council Speaker Mark Viverito, Police Commissioner Bratton, and others have called for more cops. Over the next few months, do you expect your position to move at all on that? Do you think there'll be a compromise on police headcount?
There'll be ongoing discussion, and we've now have one budget under our belt, and we had a very good process last year with the council. We're going through a good process now. I don't project the outcome. That's not responsible. I've said what I think. The Speaker's made her point of view clear and the Council's point of view, and we'll go into negotiation. And we'll have a result not in months. We'll have a result within probably 5 weeks. Stay tuned. Yes?
Mr. Mayor, your thoughts, please, on the ad that the fiscally conservative group took out in the Post today, criticizing your push to increase the minimum wage as taking away jobs from youth.
This is something I've heard so many times, and it frustrates me. There are many people who will tell you that we shouldn't change the minimum wage, as if we're living in a society that's economically fair right now and we can just go with the status quo. This status quo isn't working for many, many New Yorkers and many people around the country. And the historic idea of the minimum wage was that it was a wage you could live on. Does anyone believe that about today's minimum wage? Does anyone believe that a family, or a breadwinner working 40 hours a week at that wage could possibly take care of a family in New York City today? No. I've talked about a vision for increasing the state minimum wage, which obviously, as we know here, the state and federal government get to make that decision. We don't. But I've talked about a vision of increasing the state minimum wage, giving New York City an option to go up to 30% more. We would take that immediately to $13 an hour. We would have indexing under the vision that I have, and a lot of other people I know agree with this. That would get us to $15 an hour within the next few years. That would finally allow us to offer working people a decent living, and only a beginning. We obviously have to do a lot to try and take people farther than that. But this notion that somehow we could just rest on our laurels, it's never made sense to me. It bluntly is part of the reality. It's allowed a very small number of people in this country to do very, very well, and a huge percentage of Americans to struggle. That status quo is broken. And this fight for the $15 minimum wage all over the country is stirring. A few weeks ago, 200 cities had simultaneous demonstrations for a $15 minimum wage around the country. That is a major historical moment. Something is changing, and I think the lie has been put to the argument in that advertisement.
Let's look at it.
Which city agencies and entities oversee projects that fall under the Fair Wages for New Yorkers Act?
I don't know. The Fair Wages for New Yorkers Act. I do not know the factual. Oh, our living wage law? I will get you the chapter and verse on our living wage law. Rich.
Mr.
Mr. Mayor, there is a sign that was put up, a billboard apparently, the Coors Beer Company, said, and it said, born in the Rockies, lives in Bronx, without the article before the Bronx.
I think Richie Torres is going to have strong feelings on this one.
What do you think when you hear that somebody is missing the article before the Bronx?
I think we need to educate our friends from Coors on the proper way to talk about the Bronx. They obviously haven't spent a lot of time around here. So they need to bring their cool, refreshing beers here and learn how to speak properly about the Bronx. Thank you.